What's up, everyone? Welcome to episode 37 of the See-Through Podcast, a weekly podcast that creates transparency on disabilities and the champions with them. I'm your host, Lance Johnson, and I live, create, and podcast from Brooklyn, New York, with an inherited retinal disease called retinitis pigmentosa, or RP for short. And speaking of RP, my guest today marks the 12th guest I've had on that also lives with RP. And while my podcast covers any and all disabilities, it's always very interesting for me to hear other perspectives on something that I live with. And my guest today is Shaini Saravanamuthu. And Shaini definitely brings a fresh perspective to the ever-growing RP conversation I'm building here on this podcast. More specifically, in this episode, we talk about a wild surgical experience Shaini just underwent, her views on the disability community as a whole, how living with her visual impairment has shaped her personality, and much more. I could keep hyping this conversation up, but I don't want to spoil anything. In fact, I think I'm doing you a favor by not doing that. But before you hear my conversation with Shaini, make sure to follow or subscribe to the podcast on whatever platform you're streaming this on to be the first to know about future episodes. Also, make sure to follow the See-Through Podcast on social media. The handle is @SeeThroughPod. I'm always posting new content on social media, so you don't want to miss out there. All right, let's do this thing. Here's episode 37 with Shaini. Enjoy. Welcome, Shaini, to the See-Through Podcast. Thanks so much for talking with me. Let's start off, with the basic softball question, to just get the listeners familiar with who you are. Can you give an intro to everyone?
Sure. So my name is Shaini, and I am 31, and I am from Montreal, Quebec, Canada. I guess to a person who doesn't know me, I look like a quote-unquote normal person. I'm an accountant. I'm a baker on the side. I like doing event planning. But then once you get to know me, you realize that I am a part of the visually impaired community and the disability community. I was diagnosed with RP at the age of 21, so 10 years ago. And throughout this journey of learning about this disease and overcoming and becoming more comfortable, I have found a way to use my voice and my experiences, and I do a lot of mentoring, a lot of motivational speaking, and so that's something else that I do on the side that I really enjoy and am passionate about. And I believe that's how we connected, through both of us using our platforms to speak up about RP and our visual impairment.
Yep. Yeah, I have RP myself, and before I started this podcast, I didn't really know anyone really with RP, besides my mom and sister, because they both have it. But that was it. So it's a lot of fun, talking. You're actually my 12th guest. I was looking at it before this. You're my 12th guest with RP.
Oh, nice.
And I didn't intend that to happen. My podcast kind of talks to anyone in the disability community.
Yeah.
So I have a wide variety of guests and wide variety of different types of disabilities on my podcast. But I guess it makes sense because the people with RP fascinate me, just because there's like an immediate connection, I think.
Exactly. And I think RP itself is so interesting because I feel like us, we both have RP, but I feel like all of us have something different. I feel like RP is so different between each person that that's why I love talking to other people with RP, just being able to learn and quote unquote, no pun intended, see how they see. Because we all see differently, right? So that's why I think it's so interesting about RP is that all of us have a different gene affected or a combo of genes, and so like the outcome of our vision loss is so different. So it's really nice, and like it's a great way for other people to be aware of how it's so different amongst our community itself.
Yeah, like I said, you're the 12th guest, and every guest I've had on, they're different, you know, in terms of what they see, their field of vision, when they were diagnosed, you know, so their strain of RP or their genetic mutation, you know, it's probably unlimited how many variations there can be. I know there's probably an actual number, but might as well be unlimited.
I know scientifically, I think they are currently testing for 289 or 269. At least that was my last gene. Like when I did my last gene testing 2 years ago, that was the number that they told me they tested against. So I came back, I didn't match to any of them. So I'm actually currently like, don't have any idea how I have RP.
No match.
So I don't have a match. Yeah. So no one in my family has it. And so like when I found out about RP, it was literally the first time I ever heard about it.
Yeah, that's interesting because, and I had my genetics counselor who did the testing for me. I've had her as a guest on the podcast. And what's neat about how I found out my strain, I would have been in the same boat as you, but since my mom and sister have RP, we all got tested at the same time. Okay. And I was the first to get tested, and I had 3 different genetic mutations that could be pinpointed to RP. So they were like, well, we don't know which of the 3, but these are the 3. And then so my sister got tested, and then my mom got tested. And then the way we found out which strain it was there was only one mutation that was common amongst us 3. So then therefore, you know, just process of elimination, you know, that's our strain. And I have it written down somewhere. It's fun. I should probably know that. I don't know the name of it.
That's okay.
Yeah. But yeah, genetic testing, I highly recommend it for anyone out there listening who hasn't done it, especially if you have RP. It's the only way you're going to find out what specific strain of RP you have, and then also what research is being done on the specific strain that you have. So get tested. You know?
I think that's so important. Exactly. Like if you don't know your like strain, you might be missing out on like a treatment that's up and coming where you're living. So like, I think it's so important to be able to find out, if you can, what's causing your genetic mutation.
Yeah. So you're based in Montreal. I've had a guest with RP on, Mary Memoliti.
Okay.
Who has a Kitchen Confession podcast.
Yes, she's actually in Toronto.
Oh, she's in Toronto.
Yes. She's in Toronto. Yeah, we're not too far. So I think I'm like in the middle of both of you guys, because it takes me about 5 hours to go to Toronto and about 5 to 6-ish hours to come to New York City. So I'm kind of like middle point of you two. But yeah, she's 5 hours away from me. Yeah.
Maybe and I have another guess. Maybe he's from Montreal. Victor Mifsud. He's on social media. His handle is a blind biohacker.
Yeah,
you might be familiar with him.
He's in Toronto also. I think I'm like the only one that's in Montreal, to be honest. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's cool. Now I'm expanding to Montreal.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love every time. I swear, I feel like it's a true stereotype that Canadians are nice.
There's some that don't fit, but yeah, for the most part, I guess we're nice.
Yeah. I always have fun. And but yeah, Mary Memoliti, Kitchen Confession podcast. I was actually a guest on her podcast, and she's been on mine.
Oh my god, her podcast was so much fun to be on. The game that she plays at the end.
Yeah. Oh, so you were on it too?
It was a while back though.
I'll have to go listen to your episode.
I think it was like 2018 maybe.
Yeah, and that's through Accessible Media Inc.
Exactly.
I'm trying to basically build the foundation for the listeners of you. So you are an accountant.
I am.
And that is not affiliated with Accessible Media Inc., right?
Not at all.
Not at
No.
all.
No. I do my 8 to 5 in the morning, and then at night and on the weekends, I focus on my advocacy and Accessible Media. I am actually their community reporter. So once a month, I go on air with them and just catch up with them on events and things that are happening in Montreal and how those events can be helpful for those of us in our community and what new stuff is coming out up and happening. It's been a little tough during COVID because obviously with COVID there's not much really happening. So been trying to find online events for people that can take part in and still feel like they're able to connect with people amongst a pandemic and a lockdown.
I was excited to see that you were connected to Accessible Media because I really love what they're doing.
Yeah.
I was also featured one week on their AMI podcast roundup.
Oh, nice.
With Daniel Panamondo.
Okay.
So that was cool.
That's really cool. Yeah.
So I have 2 connections there. That's kind of neat.
Yeah.
But let's get back to you.
Okay.
I think that's what's important. That's more important. So you're an accountant. That's your full-time job. That's how you stack those cash.
Cash flow.
Cash flow, yeah. But you're also into baking and cake decorating. And then like we just were talking about, you're a community reporter with Accessible Media Inc. And then you're very active online on social media with disability activism and disability activism as a whole, right? Not just related to visual impairments, or do you
just
mainly
in general,
focus?
yeah. Just for the entire disability community. I didn't want to single out because we're all kind of fighting for the same thing. So, yeah.
Yeah, and that's my point of view too. Is why I talk to everyone on my podcast. Anyone's with a disability, I'll talk to.
Exactly.
Because I think you're right. Like that, we're all kind of fighting for the same accessibility issues and challenges. Are all facing the same problems, and there's a lot of overlap.
Yeah.
And I talk about this a lot. I wonder if you agree or disagree that there can be cliques within different disabilities. Like if you're visually impaired, you only talk and network with visually impaired people, I've noticed, like that kind of thing.
Yeah, it kind of sucks, right? Because we're all because for me, why I'm so passionate about speaking about the disability community is that is the one, I guess you could say, a minority group that you can become a part of at any point in your life.
Yeah,
it can happen to you at any time. And I think that's why I think people need to be more mindful and be more aware of the things that we go through, the struggles that we have, because unfortunately we don't know if, like right now I'm a part of the disability community because I'm visually impaired, but we don't know what life has in store. We could become a part of another group in the disability community, and it can happen to us at any time. So that's why I think we should all help each other, talk about it, raise awareness, and just we're all in the same community regardless of what is qualifying us to be a part of that community, right? So I think it's our job as a community to come together and just keep an eye out for each other in that sense. No pun intended.
Yep. Yeah, I find myself saying stuff like that all the time. Like
I know, I say it, I'm like, crap.
Yeah, I agree completely, and I think it's refreshing to meet people with the same perspective, because it's one of the reasons I have this podcast, is to kind of bridge the gap between different disabilities. But cool, super, super cool. And then, but you have RP. We could probably have a lot to talk about RP, right?
Yep.
Since you're my 12th guest with RP, I have some questions that we haven't really covered yet.
Sure.
With those other ones.
Okay.
But I guess we can start with, just where you're at with your RP journey. Maybe talk about age you were diagnosed, and then what maybe your current field of vision is and all that.
Sure. So I got diagnosed at the age of 21. So I am now 31. So 10 years ago, I actually got diagnosed by fluke. It's not that I was experiencing symptoms or so I didn't realize. I just literally changed eye doctors, went for a regular checkup before my driver's permit test. So I went in, and at that point, the place that I went into, they started taking the pictures of your retina. So the Technician took those. I walked into the doctor's office. He did the regular thing, and then I guess he saw the picture of my retina, and then he was like, okay, I'm just gonna take a pen and tell me when you see it. I'm like sitting there, I'm like, you can start. He's like, I did. I'm like, oh, okay. And like literally I only noticed the pen when it was like in front of me. And I was like, oh, like normal people notice it earlier? And he's like, yeah. I'm like, oh, okay. And he's like, see, like we took a picture of your retina today. I see some pigment points. I think you're going to be the first person I ever diagnosed with RP. And he's been in the industry for like 30 plus years. And I was like, okay. And like at that point, I had never heard of it before. So like to me, it was just like information going into my brain. And I was just like, okay. Like, what is RP? And automatically in my head, like I'm thinking, okay, he's telling me I have something. In my head, I'm automatically thinking, well, he's going to be able to fix it. So like, don't freak out. And he didn't really give me much because like, he was just an optometrist, right? So he was just, okay, I'm going to send you to a specialist. They'll look into it more. They'll run more tests and you'll officially get diagnosed. So I went, I did my driver's like permit test. I passed. But then I went home and I Googled what RP was. And it's probably the biggest mistake I ever made because 10 years ago, Googling RP was the most terrifying thing in the world because like nothing came up. Like there was no science that was evolving. It was just very scary. You Googled and it basically just told you, yeah, it leads to blindness. There's no cure. And I was 21 and I had graduated. I was working in my field and I literally thought like my life was just like taking off. And then this diagnosis happened. You read that and you're just kind of like, where do I go from here? And then like our online community, like social media wasn't a huge thing back then. And even the people that were on it, I wouldn't say anyone from our community was very vocal back then in 2011. So I didn't really have anyone to look up to or anyone to kind of like message or see or like kind of see quote unquote through their feed to see how life can be as someone with RP. So it was just a very like complicated, dark time. So at that point, I got diagnosed and I'm like, oh, my life kind of makes sense. Like it makes sense. When I was younger, I was clumsy. My mom always told me like, hey, Shaini, like look at the floor when you walk, like stop bumping into things. And now it makes sense. I don't have peripheral vision. So that's why I always had to look at the ground while I walked, because if I looked up straight ahead, I didn't see a step or a curve or something come. Then I realized why I was having trouble seeing at night, because my eyes don't adjust. I thought, well, the neighborhood I'm in just sucks. They don't have enough lighting, but no, it was my eyes. So like, it was a lot to take in. And I was 21. You think you're invincible at 21, right? So it took a lot to like, I guess just process and try to, I don't know, take it all in. And I'm also from a South Asian community where our community doesn't really talk about disability or illnesses, especially if you're female. There's this pressure that a female has to be like perfect so she can be marriage material. So people don't talk about their issues. So I didn't really talk to anyone about it. I didn't open up about it. I didn't even tell my parents till like I officially got diagnosed and had all my somewhat questions answered. So it was a very lonely time. But then life happens. You kind of pick yourself up. I went to therapy. I tried to get as much help as I could. At one point you stop feeling sorry for yourself and you're like, okay, like time to get my shit together. And yeah, so all that happened. And I think at like 25, I lost a bit of significant amount of my peripheral vision. So I had less than 10%. So that's when I legally became blind. And my nighttime vision is pretty crap. Like I need like a flashlight. Even then, like the flashlight doesn't really help. I don't have much depth perception. So looking down on a flight of stairs, I don't know if you experienced this, but like I kind of just see a ramp. If they don't have lines on the steps to differentiate that it's a new step, it kind of just looks like a ramp.
Yeah, steps can be tricky.
Yeah.
They, especially like you said, if they're like the same color and there's no like marker on the edge.
Especially if it's like outside and it's super bright and it's like those concrete steps.
Yeah.
Good luck.
Yeah, I agree. It's tricky and I sometimes I get like almost like vertigo effect going down steps.
Yes. I think it's because we're trying to focus so hard. It might be that. And we're trying to balance, focus, and try to like, now I caught, the railing becomes your best friend. But during COVID, like I'm trying not to touch the railing as much because the railings kind of help you differentiate when the staircase stops and stuff like that, you know? And I didn't even realize that till I needed to realize that.
The railing.
Yeah.
I'm like one of those. I love the rail.
Mm-hmm. And I never realized that railings were made a certain way for you to realize when the step completely stops, you know? Like when you don't need to, you don't realize these things. It's only now that we're like, okay, we depend on the railing, we depend on lighting, that we become so aware, right? So, so in 2018, I had realized that like one of my eyes was stronger than the other. So like if I had closed my left eye, I wouldn't really be able to see much. It was completely blurry, even if I was wearing my glasses or wearing contacts. And I was like, oh, this is not like right. Like this doesn't seem right. So I went to my optometrist and she told me like to go see my RP specialist. And I did in 2018. And I was like, hey, like this doesn't seem right. Like I'm really nervous. Like all of a sudden my right eye is like I'm not able to see it. If something happens to my left eye, like I won't be able to see at all. And he basically didn't do any extra tests or anything. And he was just kind of like, oh, you have RP. It's normal. One eye is stronger than the other. I'm like, seriously though? Like even with my glasses and if I cover the eye, like it's not the same. And he's like, no, it's fine. So whatever, he's the RP specialist and he was like, it's fine. So I went to go see him again in 2019. He said, no big changes. Everything looks fine. I continued. After my 30th birthday, January 2020, like one day I woke up and I noticed like a black spot. So with RP, we lose our peripheral vision. So like it's tunnel vision. But what was weird about it was that the black spot wasn't on my peripheral in the sense that I would see and then there would be a black spot and then I would see on my left eye. So it was in the middle. So I started freaking out because right now, at that point, my right eye, I couldn't see as much. So I was like, okay, if my left eye is going to have a blind spot in my central vision, what am I even going to be able to see? So I tried getting a hold of my RP specialist and he decided as of 2020, he was only going to see one adult patient a month. So I got put on a wait list, even though it was an emergency. So I went back to my optometrist, who is my emergency optometrist, and she literally looked at me and went, but didn't I tell you to go see him? And I was like, I did. I went to go see him in 2018, right after I saw you. And he told me it's normal and that I have RP and one eye will always be stronger than the other. And she goes, no. She's like, something's wrong. She goes, that doesn't make sense. She goes, like your acuity on that right eye is like crap. And she goes, it doesn't make sense. So she's like, okay, you know what? We got a new machine. I want to try it on you. We'll see if I can figure something out because if he's not willing to do it. So she does an OCT scan on me. So it's basically a CT scan of your eye. She does the scan. I go back in. She's like, Shaini. She's like, you have a full-blown hole on your right eye in my macula. And I'm like, excuse me? And she's like, you have a hole. And she goes, a hole just doesn't happen overnight. She goes, you must have had the tear when you first came to see me in 2018. And now it's a full-blown hole 2 years later.
So like an actual hole, like a tear in your eye.
In my macula, right, exactly. So.
And what is the macula again?
So it's like the backing of your eye. It kind of helps with letting things, it communicates with your brain and it lets in like light come in and stuff. So now that there's a hole there, I completely everything was blurry, like distorted. Like my vision was like, if I were to look at something, it would look like, you know how on a TV, if things get distorted, it's all like not aligned? That's how my vision would look, and it was completely blurry.
So is this the macula? Is this like the interior of the eye, or is this something that happened like on the physical exterior?
So it's the interior all the way to the back. So it's right behind your retina.
So how do you get a tear inside? Like
so
how does
some people, it can be that you can get into like you could have an impact, you can hit something, it can be like the shock of it that rips it, it can be from stress. Some people get it if you have high blood pressure. So for me, we think, I also have PCOS, which is like a female hormonal I guess you can call like metabolic disorder. And so that can cause cysts in your body. So they think that I must have had a cyst in my eye, and that cyst, when it got inflamed, pulled on the macula and tore it. And since we have like RP, the cells in our retina don't really reproduce or regenerate like everyone else's, so the hole wasn't able to fix itself. So it just kind of got bigger and bigger, and then it became my actual hole. And that's why, so they thought the reason why I started seeing that black line on my left eye was that the hole was not letting my left eye see properly. So I literally found this out 2 days before Montreal went into complete lockdown with COVID. So the timing was crap. So that happened, and no other RP specialist was taking new patients because of COVID and with all those restrictions. Thank God for social media. I knew someone who worked in the field in Montreal, asked her for help. She was able to get me an appointment with an RP specialist, with a retinal specialist, sorry. And he was like, yeah, this is not something I can just fix in my office. You need to have emergency surgery. You need to have it done at the hospital. I'm faxing over your stuff. They're going to call you. You're going to have surgery. We'll be able to fix it. But then he also told me, like, you have RP and the hole's quite big. So like, we'll see what they can do. So I was like, okay, whatever. So I'm thinking emergency surgery, it's going to happen. This is like mid-March. Mind you, COVID happens. City goes into lockdown. The hospitals are overstaffed. All general surgeries, unless it was completely life-threatening, was completely postponed. So it kind of sucks with, like, obviously I lived with this hole for a very long time. I didn't realize. But then now that you know, it's like your mind F's with you, right? And you're like, oh, my head hurts, this hurt. Like, I don't know if it's like a mind game or just it all hit all at once. So I waited and waited. No one called me, and cases were getting so bad here. Things were closing down. Things were getting worse, and I was just like, okay, like, what is happening? So then I wasn't gonna speak about it till it got fixed. But then I was like, you know what? People are being careless and being out and about. And there's people like me, friends that I have who have cancer, who are waiting to have treatment, and they can't because people are being careless and hospitals are overloaded. And so I decided to talk about how I need to have surgery, and with all these COVID rules, it's not possible. I haven't even met my surgeon. Like, they're so overstaffed overloaded and understaffed at the hospital that this isn't going to happen. So someone actually that I know, that I met through retail back in the days, happened to work at ophthalmology in Montreal in the hospital. She read my story and she messaged me and said, hey, can you send me a picture of your referral from your retinal specialist? I'm going to give it to my surgeon. I'm going to have him call you. So I'm so grateful to her. By April 8th, I met my surgeon, and he was like, yeah, this is what happened. You have a hole. And he also saw that I had cataract in both eyes. So he said he would need to fix everything. So he put me on the wait list. We knew that with COVID, it would still be a bit of a wait. We waited. In September, I noticed my vision got a bit worse. So I called him and said, like, I don't know how much longer we can wait. Like, I'm scared that my retina is going to detach. So he's like, you know what, let me put the emergency in right now. So he's like, someone should call you within a month, hopefully. Someone called me within 7 days and said, hey, your surgery is in 2 days. So what they did the first time is that they put a gas bubble in my eye. And that gas bubble is supposed to go and fill the hole. And so when you get the surgery done, you have to be face forward for like a week, completely face forward at 24 hours a day. It was the most painful thing ever.
When you say face forward, can you explain that?
So like, picture yourself lying on a massage table, like you have to be horizontally that way. Like your head your
for
eyes.
A whole week?
Yeah. So the first time, so basically I got surgery done. I didn't realize it was supposed to be like this. So I thought I can just lie on my bed like that, but then it hurts. It gets really painful on your neck, on your back. And unfortunately the surgery, like when I went in for my post-op, like 4 days later, they realized that it wasn't working. So like, okay, let's have you do it for an extra week and a half. So I actually ended up doing it for 2.5 weeks, and it didn't work. And I was so disappointed, discouraged, frustrated, because you can't look at a phone, you can't look at it, you literally couldn't do anything. Podcasts were the only thing I can do. So I was super frustrated because I find out that it didn't work. But then he was like, you know what? There's another surgery that we can possibly try. It's not something that people have tried often, but it is a possibility. But once again, since you have RP, we don't know how it's going to work, but we'll give it a try. So they put my paperwork in for the second one. So I'm thinking this is not going to happen for a while because we went into our second wave at this point. Luckily, I was very fortunate. I got a call within like 2 weeks and I had my second surgery, but this time they put a piece of amniotic membrane, so which is like a piece of an umbilical cord. So the stem cells from the umbilical cord that go in your eye to fill the hole, and then they put the gas bubble. So the purpose of this is to hope that the stem cells are smart enough to go in and mimic the cells that create the barrier, the lining right at your macula. So so this time I had to be face forward for 4 days. I went in for my post-op, and luckily the umbilical cord sat in the hole very nicely, and we were very shocked to see that the cells in my retina actually grew over the umbilical cord.
Wow.
So we were very shocked because we thought that it would just be a plug and that we would have to keep monitoring over and over because I have RP, because we didn't think it would grow on top because, as you know, our cells are either dormant or completely dead in our eye, in our retina there. So we don't know if it's the stem cells that grew on top or if it was my actual cell. I'm now a part of the research where they're trying to figure out stuff and now using me to see if it's actually something that RP patients can use going forward. So it's kind of nice. It's cool. So I have a piece of an umbilical cord in my eye, and I am now, I think, 6 months post-operation, and the doctor said it looks good. Inflammation has gone down. So now I'm just they're just monitoring me to see if I'll actually get the vision back now that the hole is closed. Since RP patients, we obviously take longer and we're a bit of a special case. So they're hoping maybe within a year, I'll be able to get back some of the vision that I lost because of the hole. So my central vision. Yeah. Okay. So long story short.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad your story has a happy ending.
Yeah, no, it was, I'm super grateful to my new medical team. I'm no longer going to my old RP specialist. I'll be continuing to go with the surgeon that I see now.
Yeah, he dropped the ball on that.
Big time. And what's funny? He still hasn't called me back. I'm still on that wait list apparently. And it's been over a year. So whenever he calls me, I guess he'll find out that I had a surgery and that now I have a new doctor. I'm super grateful and hopeful about science. The fact that an umbilical cord, something that we never thought could be used to help us. I never at least thought. I'm just super great. Honestly, this whole journey from 21 to now, I think the biggest thing that I've learned is gratitude and just being so grateful for the good that we've come across in this journey, the people that we meet, the stories that we hear, science, from the day that I Googled that February 2011 to if I Google now is a whole different story. I feel like it's so much more positive than it was back then. You see so much science evolving, so much promising treatments that can possibly come through and help people. So it's definitely been a crazy ride, but now that it's been 10 years, I definitely would say it's more optimistic and a lot more hopeful.
Yeah, that's great. And hope is important, Yeah, I hate hearing stories about doctors like that because I try my best to not have a negative viewpoint.
Yeah.
I have this natural instinct to not really trust doctors, or I feel like it's such a business kind of thing where it's 10 minutes in, they're in and out, and they it's hard for me to believe most of them are actually investing in you.
Yeah, and that's why I saw such a difference between the surgeon that I have now and like the RP specialist. And what sucks is that like RP is so rare. So like the fact that there's only one RP specialist in Montreal means like he's the only one I can go to. So like there was no one that I could actually even go for a second opinion unless I were to go like out of province, out of country or something. So like he was the RP specialist. He said it was normal. I trusted him, even though he only spends 10 minutes on me once a year, even though you're spending like an hour and a half in the waiting room. But then this new surgeon, like he genuinely cared. I remember like when the first surgery didn't work, like I couldn't see anything, but I heard it in his voice. Like it dropped when he saw the scans. And that's when I knew he cared. Like it wasn't just for him, it wasn't research. It was the fact that this is my patient and I want to help her and my job is to help her. And I couldn't. What I did for her didn't help. And he was genuinely so concerned. And that's why when he did the second one, he had another doctor come in. And I remember like the second surgery, I wasn't fully out. Like I heard everything that happened in the surgery. So like I heard them talking and stuff and like genuinely they cared. And that to me made a whole world of a difference. And just to know that you're not just a research number, because some doctors, unfortunately, we are just a research number because we're so rare. So
yeah. No, yeah, I've had similar experiences where I used to see a retina specialist in North Carolina, Chapel Hill, North Carolina, and she was a great doctor, but you know they would have like medical students kind of shadowing, and they'd be in the room, and then you know since RP is rare, as a student, hey. The doctor would be like, check this out. This is what RP looks like. And then you feel like a lab rat or something like that. Yeah. And you can tell like, oh, wow. Like they're like amazed at what they're seeing and how different it is than what a normal eye is. Yeah. And the way they talked about, I don't know. It's just like, I get it that from a medical standpoint, it's interesting, but like, I'd rather not be
that lab rat. Exactly.
Amazed by.
Because honestly, like even for like the optometrist, like they don't get to see RP often either. Like my optometrist, I was the first person he ever diagnosed with RP in 30 years. So even for them, it's like, okay, how do we handle this? And even like textbook wise, when they go to school for ophthalmology, they don't really cover these rare eye diseases as much as they do. Right? As much as they do for regular or more common. So I feel like, we're a guinea pig, but I also feel like that they also need to like figure out what's going on too, because they're not as aware. So it's tricky, but it's funny you say like you have medical students that come in like after I had my second surgery, since the whole process of putting an umbilical cord in my eye was a new process. People like would hear that I'm in his office and you would see them at the door and they'll be like, can I just look at her eye? Because like apparently it looks like I have like when they look through my eye, it looks like I have something silver in my eye. The umbilical cord looks like silver, so apparently they all want to see how it looks. And the fact that the stem cells
Could you say it looks shiny?
Shiny, yeah. Oh God.
I couldn't resist that one.
I know, don't worry. I love puns and stuff, so don't worry. But yeah, so it honestly, like I'm so grateful and so privileged to be able to be a part of a study, and maybe the fact that it had gotten done on me, it can help other people with RP, and doctors could look back and be like, oh, let's not waste time of just putting the gas pedal. Let's just go in with the amniotic membrane for those with RP, because that's what seems to be working better for us. Cool. So I'm grateful, and I'm glad that, like you said, I was able to have the surgery done, and that's one obstacle that I got to go over.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Very interesting. The fact that they were able to experiment and it worked, and now you're seeing benefits like this as your vision improved.
So some of it, I noticed a bit of the vision has come back on the right eye. My left eye, my prescription on my left eye actually got a bit better. Cool. And I think it's because the left eye was compensating since the right eye wasn't working, right? So they think that's probably why now like the eyes are kind of balancing themselves out. It's the biggest misconception that I've been getting on social media, or like people in the community, or like my uncles or whatever, they all think like that my RP is fixed now. And I'm like, oh, no. that is not what my surgery was for.
Yeah.
So I think that's the biggest misconception that I had on social media. A lot of people thought like, okay, so you don't have RP anymore, right? And I was like, trust me, if that was the way to get rid of RP, we would all be screaming on the top of our lungs right now.
No one would have RP anymore.
Yeah,
I'd be in surgery next week.
Exactly. All the ORs would be booked with all of us.
Yeah.
So, no, but I think that's why it's kind of important. That's why I'm so vocal about everything, because I think it's so important to be transparent and just kind of help, because like I've got people who message me. I recently had someone who messaged me who didn't have RP, who found out she had a hole in her macula and wanted to know how like the surgery was, how the recovery was. And I wish I had someone to like give me the heads up, like, because the second one, I actually ended up getting a massage table and it was so much more comfortable. And I ended up putting it near the window, near the sun. It made me feel better. I didn't feel like crap like I did during the first one. So I feel it's so important when you're ready to like talk about your story and like your experiences, because you never know who it can help.
Yeah. And you said a word that I have to call out. You said transparent, and that's kind of the catchphrase of this podcast, creating transparency.
Yeah.
And this is my attempt of being transparent, and and I like to let other people be transparent. So maybe someone will hear that, and then they'll know to reach out to you if they have a question, or going through something similar, or maybe they'll relate to you more than they relate to me. So it's like, which is probably the real reality of this podcast. But yeah, thanks for sharing that. And I hope it continues to get better for you.
Hope so too. And hopefully maybe they can find something with the stem cells to help RP patients also, not just the hole, but like, that's what I'm hopeful. I'm really hopeful about stem cells. I'm hoping those guys are the ones that help us in the future.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's new, and I haven't heard of that. Switching gears a little bit.
Sure, go for it.
I wanted to ask you a question, because I think I'm just curious, and I just think it's interesting thought. So you were diagnosed when you were 21, and you're 31 now.
Yeah.
So that's 10 years of knowing about RP, but you were probably experiencing symptoms before that. And those are very, very like formative years, like 20s, So you've grown a lot as an individual in those 10 years. Do you think having RP has helped shape your current personality? Do you think you would be a different person if you didn't have RP?
100% yes.
Okay.
And I think one thing that I always say, recently I've been saying, and I remember the first time I said it, it caught me off guard because I didn't even realize I felt that way, is that I'm actually grateful to be on this journey with RP, because I don't think I would have had that much, I don't know what the word is, like it literally pushed me to places I would have never gone. Like growing up, I hated public speaking. I was that girl in school who would ask the teacher, like, can I do my presentation alone in front of you at lunch? Because I don't want to do it in front of the class. Like, I was that person. And I was an outgoing person, but when it came to public speaking, I was just very nervous. And through this journey, I really got out of that shell. I started doing motivational speaking and public speaking. And that's something I never in a million years thought I would do or pictured myself doing. Also with RP, I feel like it pushed, like there's the people that I've met, this like you and everyone else in our community I would have never met. And I think my life wouldn't be the same without the people in our community. The things that I've learned, I have RP, but there's so much more to our community. And the one thing I love about our community is that we all have our own skill set that people would think wouldn't think we have. And I think learning and seeing other people's stories has really opened up my eyes to so many things. And like, had I not been diagnosed with RP, I would have never met this community. I would have never been aware about this community. And that's made me so grateful and opened my eyes to so many things. And I don't know if I would be as immersed into this world had I not been diagnosed. You know, like it just, maybe I would have been one of those ignorant, like, mind you, I didn't know any of this existed till I got diagnosed, right? So maybe I just would have been one of those ignorant people who had no idea this existed. And to think that that would have been a possibility is kind of hard. Like, it sucks, you know? So it's like, and even the people around me, like the only reason our community, like my community in Montreal or my group of friends or the South Asian community is even aware about RP is because I speak about it, and they either know me or are connected with me and they have spoken to other people about it. So it's kind of like, I always wonder, I'm like, what would my life be like? I feel like RP pushed me, like, especially in the beginning, because I didn't talk about my disability, like no one knew about it. I like pushed myself to do so much so people wouldn't realize that something was wrong. Like I started a cake business because I was like, oh, I can't do much. Let me start baking. And that became like a business. And like, I was such a perfectionist at it because I didn't want to mess up. And I didn't want people to think like, oh, what is she blind? Like, how did she miss that? You know, like those kinds of things that push me to work super hard. I always wanted to push myself to prove like, regardless of what's happening, I can still get to where I am, like work-wise, career-wise. And I think it gave me that extra push, or like, you know, to like do better, do the best I can to show people like, regardless of my visual impairment, regardless of my disability, I can still do what I want to do. And that's not going to stop me. And I don't know, like I do think about this. Like if I didn't have RP, like would I have pushed myself to be where I am today? Like not just in the advocacy world, but even in my own career of being an accountant, like would I have had that strength to be so vocal? Because I feel like it's this advocacy stuff that has made me so vocal and like, I guess you can say opinionated, or like, you know, strong in that sense to be so vocalized. I guess, yes. And so, you know, so like, I'm super grateful. But like, yeah, so I'm super grateful that I'm on this journey. Like, obviously, in an ideal world, it would have been great. It would be great to have a treatment and to say like, yeah, I got to experience all this and now we have a treatment. It's great. But like, I'd hope maybe not, I don't know if we're going to see it in our lifetime. I hope we can, but as long as we are so vocal and helping spread awareness, I hope like the generations after us don't ever have to go through what we did, where they tell us where there's no cure. Like I want to see a world where someone unfortunately gets diagnosed with RP, but they tell them like, oh, but don't worry, there is a treatment for it. Like, that's where I want this world to go.
Yeah. I love your answer. I think having a disability it's kind of sad. Like you were talking about, maybe you would be that person who would be ignorant to, you know, the disability community, but that seems to be the case, right? Like the only people, for the most part, I don't want to write off everyone. For the most part, people who become like heavily involved with like accessibility issues and, you know, disability activism, or people with disabilities, because you don't even think about it until you're in that point of view, you know, in terms of like, say you get in an accident and you're in a wheelchair, you're probably going to learn very quickly that there's a lot of accessibility issues in your building and places you go, because now you're forced to look at it. Or if you're you know, become visually impaired, you're gonna realize like how to use a cane and how certain things are more challenging than others in terms of navigating the world. And but yeah, I just think that it opens your eyes to the world of accessibility issues. I think just having one, and that's another goal for me with this podcast, is just people without disabilities to kind of plant that seed. If they're listening, like, oh yeah, I should think about that too. Yeah.
I think companies, especially like now that the culture is work from home, you saw like companies like Microsoft like really focus on accessibility when it comes to Teams and all that stuff, because they realized how that has to be something very important. And I think more and more companies are becoming more aware of this stuff. Like when you look at online shopping, some companies are getting more on the side of being able to be more like compliant, more accessible for the visually impaired, with more description, more like better color palette. I guess you can say, with their websites for those who are colorblind. People are coming more and more aware. So it's a step in the right direction, and I hope it keeps going towards that direction. And it's not just like a trend.
Yeah.
But I use Teams at work, and honestly, like I remember when I first started, I was like, okay, like how can I even change the format so it's easier for me to see? Like it wasn't easy at first, but then I think like a month or two into it, they had an update for it. And then I think a couple months later, they had an update for those who are hearing impaired. So it's nice to see companies have specific departments called accessibility teams, their main goal is to help those who are a part of that community. And I know, like on LinkedIn and stuff, I see so many companies with those departments, and I see how they're doing their best to be more accessible to everyone in our community. So
Yeah, I agree. I think it's amazing. I think it's a good shift and change. Yeah, I hope it's not just a trend,
Yeah.
I don't think it is. Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. Yeah, fingers crossed.
Okay. All right.
How about you? Would you say it changed you as a person? Like, how long have you been diagnosed for?
So I was diagnosed young. I was diagnosed when I was 12 because my mom has RP. So they were kind of just looking for it, basically.
They were monitoring. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so they saw it, but I wasn't, as far as I know, I mean, how would I know? But I don't remember noticing any real symptoms until I was like early 20s.
Yeah, same. Okay.
And now I'm 30. I'll be 31 in August. And I've noticed a significant change in my peripheral. I have some blind spots in my central vision as well, due to I think it's called optic drusen or something like that.
Okay.
But I'm not legally blind.
Okay.
And I don't use a cane.
Okay. Are you still able to drive?
I don't drive anymore.
Okay.
I mean, that was a personal decision. So I drove for a while and then I decided not to. But like, going back to what you were asking, like what we were talking about, has it changed me? I think yes, because it's it makes things easier for me to focus on, like, should I try this? Should I do this? It's like, yes, I should, because maybe I won't be able to do this in the same way with, later. So like I'm more, I guess, it
gives you that push.
Yeah, like the carpe diem kind of thing.
Yeah, I get it.
And so that's part of it. Also, I feel a lot more empathetic to the disability community from now being in the disability community. I also think it helps me prioritize just my life and what I spend my energy on and time on, like what hobbies I want to pick up and things like that. And, I'm not really giving the best answer.
No, I think that's great. No, honestly, I'm like clapping over here because it's completely true though. Yeah, it helps you. It gives us an extra filter in life. Like that's how I explain it to people.
Yeah. It's a part of my personality now. Like RP is like a character trait of me.
Exactly.
Now.
Our blind jokes are a part of us. Like it's just like it's just a part of us. It's who we are. And like if people can't accept it, then it's too bad, too sad. Like it's a part of us. Like I always say, like I had done a podcast about dating, and like dating as a visually impaired person is hard. It can be hard, and I feel like that whole being transparent gives me that extra filter to see like who's actually going to be there for me and who's just there to mess around, and like who's actually going to be there for the long haul. And a lot of times I open up about it and you get ghosted, so it's like I'm glad it sucks, but I'm glad I have that filter so I don't have to waste my time, because like had I it's like, let's say like I didn't have RP and that's not something I had to
and you
say
wouldn't
to
want to
someone.
be involved with those people either
No,
way.
exactly.
You know?
But like in a way, like I see their true colors because I open up about my RP and my visual
Yeah.
impairment. And sometimes I wonder, I'm like, if I didn't have RP and I didn't have this conversation, how much time would I have wasted with this person till I saw this side of them?
Exactly. Yeah.
You know?
I
So,
was. That's the only thing I could add to my answer is it helps me kind of weed out people easier
yeah,
too.
100%.
People who they act a certain way or they, you know, it's immediate red flag sometimes.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Thank God, I guess. Thank God for RP, I guess.
Yeah, I know it's kind of weird to say it, like,
I know,
but
right? Like
in the
when
same,
you say stuff like that, I remember the first time I said it, and I was like, "No, I would not. I wouldn't reverse my RP diagnosis." And I was like, "Holy crap! I just said that." And I was like, "I
yeah,
guess that's how I feel." Like,
yeah,
but no, that's how I feel. But not to say that if there's a treatment down the line that I
sure,
obviously would take it. But I'm glad to have gone on this journey, to be on this journey,
yeah,
just because I get to meet people like you. We get to share our stories and we get to help one another. And like our community, I know we're not as big on social media because of our visual impairment. Not everyone is comfortable, but there is a huge community there, and like there's so many of us. And honestly, I'm very proud of our community. Like the people I do have and have connected with, everyone's thriving and finding their own way of doing things, and it's like good. I want the world to see that like we're not that stereotypical what the mainstream media shows us as someone who just doesn't do anything and like can't do anything and just is a slob or like, you know, like that's not who we are. And I wish that stereotype would just be gone like ASAP because it's unfortunate that that's how people picture when you say like I have a visual impairment or I have a disability.
yeah. I agree completely,
Sucks.
and
Yeah.
yeah, I think just shifting the society's perspective of how the disability community is seen is very important because I think it's just, to be honest, I just think it's wrong. I think a lot of it's just like super like stereotypical in like a negative way.
Yeah.
You know, just like and it's lazy too. It's like not much thought put into it, but
No. Like in a movie, they'll just be like, okay, just give the person sunglasses and a cane and makes her legally blind. And it's
exactly.
like, and like for people like us, like we both don't, like I don't have a white cane, and it's like our disability is invisible if you don't know, right? And it's
Yeah.
like people question, oh, you can't be blind. There's no way you're blind. Like, why don't you have a guide dog? You don't have a white cane. So people start questioning as if we're lying about our life. And it's kind of like, why would we be lying about the fact that we're visually impaired? You know what I mean? Like, what benefit do we get from that?
Yeah, exactly. It's confusing to people because it's like,
Yeah, it is.
because I live a normal life, you know, like I take the subway, I go around the city, I don't use a cane, and then I'm like, oh, but I have this vision impairment, and they're like, but do you really? Is it really that bad if you can do XYZ, you know? But
I get called out on social media so much. It's like to the point where now I'm just not even going to reply.
yeah, it's
Like
a
in
real
the
thing.
beginning I used to because I'm like, you know, maybe they're not aware. But like I'm
Yeah.
so vocal about it on social media that I'm like, okay, if you're following me, you should be aware, you know? But I keep telling myself, okay, no, give them the benefit of the doubt. Maybe they just don't know, like I didn't know. So I'm hoping we get to that point where people are just aware that visual impairments, legally blind, disabilities can be invisible. And the fact that I think one thing that everyone should know is that we don't know what someone is going through or what they're battling behind closed doors. And sometimes we'll never know. And just to be more mindful and just to be kind because you don't know what someone is going through. So I think
very
that's
well
just
said.
something that everyone should just be aware of. You don't need to know all the details, but just be mindful, be kind, because you don't know what someone's going through.
Exactly. And honestly, that goes for people who are disabled and people who are not disabled. You know,
just in general, all humans, right?
In general, yeah. It's a good rule of thumb to live by. But I was going to say, I have a lot more RP questions for you.
Okay.
But we're out of time.
Oh, no.
So...
That's what happens. I talk too much, don't I?
No, it's fine. I'll have to have you back on.
Sounds good.
I have guests come back on, so we'll just have to pick up on another episode.
Sounds good to me.
But yeah, I'm super stoked on what we talked about because I think you added a lot of fresh new perspectives this episode. So I think the listeners will get a lot out of it. So this is a solid one. But I can't leave without, I close each episode by letting my guests give a shout out to a nonprofit, charity, or any organization that they think just is a benefit to the disability community. And I just wanted to know if you had something you wanted to.
So for me, my journey started with the help of Fighting Blindness Canada. They gave me the platform to speak about my story, to help mentor others. So they have a great program for young adults between the ages of 18 to 30, and sometimes they even let older 31, 32, even younger, just basically have a safe space, a group of people who are in the same community to get together. Usually we get together within Canada in different cities, but right now with COVID, it has been on Zoom, and it's just a great way. I think it's so important to meet other people with visual impairments just because you get to learn so much from one another, resources, just tricks and tips, and just to have a group of people who completely understand what you're going through. And the Fighting Blindness Canada also helps fund research for different eye diseases, and they're a nonprofit. And for me, I think the Young Leaders Program is so crucial, especially when you get diagnosed at a young age and you're kind of just questioning things like your education, your career, and just want resources. It's a great place to go and just to have a group of people who have your back and just want to help you and just want to mentor you and make sure you're on the right path to where you want to go.
Amazing. And if you're listening and you want to learn more about Fighting Blindness Canada, just click on the show description. I'll have a link there. You can go explore Fighting Blindness Canada. And yeah, I agree completely. It's super helpful to be involved in the community and know people with similar just life situations as you. I think it's beneficial to anyone, I think.
Yeah.
I know I mentioned it earlier, but your Instagram, it's at shines_with_RP. Go give Shaini a follow.
Thank you. Well, honestly, thank you so much for having me. It's so great to connect with you. I think we've been following each other for a while, but it's so nice to sit down and be able to get to know you, talk to you, and just spread awareness together. I think it's so great when I always love meeting other people with RP and just being able to work together and just help.
Yeah, now I feel like, we're actual friends because we had a conversation.
Exactly. We're not just Instagram followers.
Yeah, that's the beauty of this podcast and what I don't know, it's so much fun doing this. But I think that wraps up this episode. I think it's an amazing episode. I'm excited for everyone to hear it, but I don't have anything else to say.
Well, thank you for having me, and I look forward to being back.
Yeah. And we'll keep in touch. I look forward to it.
Yeah, sounds good.
Right. And there you have it, episode 37. Thanks for listening to my conversation with Shaini. What a great conversation we had. It was super fun getting to know her more. And I hope you enjoyed learning about Shaini as well. As always, if you want to learn more about any of the organizations Shaini talked about, just click the show description. I'll have some links there. Make sure to follow her on social media. And while you're following her on social media, make sure you're following this podcast on social media. The handle is at @SeeThroughPod. And if you want to reach out to me, you can DM me on social media, or you can email me at theseethroughpodcast@gmail.com. I promise I will respond. Yeah, look forward to hearing from you, and I look forward to a new episode next week. Thank you so much for listening. I appreciate it a lot, and you know the drill. Until next week, stay transparent.